We are on Tesvav Amud Aleph. So towards the bottom, about 10 lines from the bottom. Amar Rami Bar Chama. Ein hazar miskadesh. We're talking about, in the Mishnah, it had said this whole procedure for adding on to the Beis Hamikdash or to Yerushalayim, what you had to do. So we say this, that you're Ein hazar miskadesh ala b'shiyarei mincha. He says, even though we have talked about this, that you bring these Titus, you carry around 2 loaves of the Titus around Yerushalayim, that's only regarding Yerushalayim. But legabe the Azara, rather than using the Titus, the loaves from the Taida, you bring the leftovers of the mincha, meaning after you bring a carbon mincha, the part that would go normally to the Kehanim to eat, that part, you take that and you carry it around in order to enlarge the Beis Hamikdash. My timer, what's the reason? Yerushalayim. We had learned out earlier from a pasuk we saw by Nehemiah that he did this procedure, and he was enlarging Yerushalayim. My Yerushalayim davar nechal ba mekadsha. Just like by Yerushalayim, the Taida is allowed to be eaten. It's kachim kalam, it can be eaten throughout Yerushalayim. Azara davar nechal ba mekadsha. By the Azara also, it has to be something that's eaten in it, and a mincha is kachim is nechal only in the Azara, only inside the Beis Hamikdash. You're saying it can't be the lachmei taida that I use to be makadosh the Azara in the Beis Hamikdash, because it has to be something that's eaten in the Azara. What it says, there's nothing wrong with eating the lachmei taida in the Azara. They have to be in Yerushalayim, but the Azara of the Beis Hamikdash is also part of Yerushalayim. So why do we have to go away from the lachmei taida to do specifically the shiarei mincha? Just like in order to enlarge the gates, the borders of Yerushalayim, you have to carry around it something that could be eaten in Yerushalayim, and if it was removed from Yerushalayim, it would be possible. So too, by the Azara, it has to be something that could be eaten in the Azara, but if it went out of the Azara, it would be possible. So the lachmei taida are allowed to be eaten throughout the whole Yerushalayim, so they don't satisfy that definition. Now the Gemara asks, if that's the case, you're saying you're learning out from Yerushalayim, just like the lachmei taida. Let's say malal on chametz, afkan chametz. Why don't we require that you use shiarei mincha that are chametz, just like the lachmei taida are chametz? This should also be chametz. If you remember, at the end of yesterday, actually, we had said that there are 10 chametz lechems and 30 non-chametz lechems, and so we do the 10 chametz ones, like we said before, that there's the same amount of flour for each of them. So that means that's what they're called titus gedolos, the greater lechem, because they were larger. But in any case, the one says we're using the chametz lechem to enlarge Yerushalayim. Let's do something that's chametz to enlarge the Beis Hamikdash. What are you suggesting? You're saying you should bring a mincha that's chametz, right? You're saying that we should add on, in addition to it being a mincha that can only be eaten in the Beis Hamikdash in order to enlarge the Beis Hamikdash. But we're saying a second requirement should be chametz. But what is a mincha that's chametz? And if you're going to suggest, okay, so you can't a mincha itself, the silas is not chametz, but maybe after you do the avoid of the mincha, you do the kaimitz and you burn the kaimitz on the Beis Hamikdash, on the mizbeach, and now you're left with the shiarei mincha, which is eaten by the gehanim. Maybe that part they could take that flour and mix it with water and make it into something chametzdik. We learn from the pasuk that no, you're not allowed to make any part of the mincha chametz. You can't take the chelik of kehanim and make it into chametz. Even the chelik that goes to kehanim is also restricted; it can't be chametz. So you're not. So the Gemara is saying, what are you trying to suggest, that this mincha should be made to chametz, just like the lachmei taida are chametz and used to enlarge Yerushalayim? When you're enlarging the Beis Hamikdash, should also, you're saying it should also be chametz. How is it possible? The mincha is not going to be chametz, and the assumption is it has to be something made out of flour, similar to the lachmei taida. So what is your option? What can you bring that will be chametz? So Gemara, alamalai, why can we find something to bring to be mekadesh, to enlarge the boundaries of the Beis Hamikdash, just like you enlarge the boundaries of Yerushalayim, that will also satisfy the criteria of being chametz? After the mekadesh shtei halechem b'atzeres, very timely topic. Why don't you use the shtei halechem that are brought on Shavuos? Use those shtei halechem; those are chametz. So Gemara, mishum dalei afshir. That's not feasible. We're going to go through a whole bunch of possibilities and knock them all down. How are you going to use these the shtei halechem? Again, we're trying to figure out which the assumption here, the theory over here is that we want to make expanding the boundaries of Shalayim similar to expanding the boundaries of the Beis Hamikdash. So we said you expand the boundaries of Yerushalayim using lachmei taida, which are chametz. The Gemara asked, let's use something that's chametz also. So the Gemara said we use shari mincha for the boundaries of the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara asks, why don't we do something chametz? The Gemara asks, this mincha can't be chametz. So what about the shtei halechem of Shavuos? Those are chametz. Why don't we use those? So the Gemara mishum dalei afshir. It's not possible. What are you going to do? Nivnaya me'asmal. If you're going to say anytime you want to expand the Beis Hamikdash, you'll build it on Erev Shavuos, v'nikdashei me'asmal, shtei halechem, v'nikdashei me'asmal, and make the shtei halechem of Shavuos, make them kaddish as the shtei halechem on Erev Shavuos, and use that, and carry them around to expand the Beis Hamikdash. So Gemara, shtei halechem b'shchitas kvasim l'dukachi. Doesn't work. It only becomes kaddish with the kvasim of Shavuos, and those kvasim are only brought on Shavuos, so you can't do it a day earlier. It's not going to become kaddish with kedusha of shtei halechem. Nivnaya meyasma v'nikdasha idna. So you'll say, build the extension of the Beis Hamikdash on Erev Shavuos and make it kaddish on Shavuos, being in kiddush b'shas habinyan. Where it says no, you can't do that. You can't then do the parade with the taidis after the binyan is completed a day later. It has to be immediately afterwards. So Gemara, nivnaya b'yom tov. Build it on Yom Tov, Nikdash be Yom Tov, and then make the Kiddush, expand, do the procedure with the Shtei Halechem on Yom Tov, and Binyan HaMikdash Deicha Yom Tov, like we've seen, that Binyan Beis HaMikdash is not Deicha Shabbos, and certainly not Deicha Yom Tov. Nishavka Lebasar Hachi, let's say, maybe just leave around the Shtei Halechem till after Shavuos, V'nivnaya, and finish the Binyan after Shavuos, V'nikdashay, and make it on the day following Shavuos. If it's a labelina, the shtei halechem will become possible. They have to be consumed on before that night, before chatzos. So So once you build the whole base, whatever this extension is, build it right on Erev Shavuos, in a shayir port, and leave a tiny bit left over. Da kaddish yuma la'alta nigmare. Wait till right after Shavuos is over and immediately build it, and then immediately make the procedure, make the procession with the two shtei halechem.
When does it become possible? Only at the end of the night?
So Lina is by chatzos. After chatzos, it's possible, Lina. So Rashi says. So Gemara, you can't complete the binyan of the Beis Hamikdash on Motzei Shavuos. You'll wait, you'll do everything else, you'll just leave a little bit. Even that little bit you're not allowed to do at night. Therefore, the Gemara concludes that we don't have any way of finding something chametz to be used for around the Beis Hamikdash. It has to be, obviously, like we said, the presupposition of this is it has to be something that's confined to only being in the Beis Hamikdash. Otherwise, you could do the lachmei taida like you do for expanding Yerushalayim, but something that's kachim that you're going to be able, that's going to be chametz, you can't find, and that's why we use the shiyarei mincha.
The shiyarei mincha is not chametz.
I'm sorry?
The shiyarei mincha is not chametz.
Right. That was what we said on the top. A mincha itself is not chametz, and then we brought a pasuk that even the part that's left over that the Kehanim eat, it sounds like they have to bake it with in the satmar in the Karastira bakery, so that it should not be within 18 minutes it doesn't become chametz. Ubashir, another part of the procedure of expanding Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash was they would sing. Tanu Rabbanu shir shel toida. They would see the shir shel mizmah l'saida, and they would say it b'kinaros or b'navalim b'betzaltzalim, with lutes and harps and cymbals and all kinds of musical instruments. Al kol pino va kol even gedol Yerushalayim. When they're doing this, they would go around every corner and every cornerstone and every large stone Yerushalayim. They would make sure to have a celebration by it. You have raised me up, well, because I have been poor. V'shayir, v'shir shal pegoyim, and they would also say the shir shal pegoyim. V'yesh shir shal negoyim. Some people call that, instead of the shir shal pegoyim, they would say shir shal negoyim. Manda amar de negoyim, the one that says it was negoyim d'chsev, v'nega la yikrav ba'al lecha. This is all. I think that's the parsha. Rashi says what it is. Who mizma shir chanukas habayis. You say it's chanukas habayis. It makes a lot of sense. You would say that as you're going around. So they would say that, and they say shir shabagoyim yishem shir shanagoyim. Mandam negoyim d'chsev naga nega la yikar ba'alecha. There won't be any nega. There won't be any sickness. So that's what they call it, shir of negoyim. Mandam repagoyim d'chsev yipol mitzidcha elef. That this is all part of Yoshe b'Seiser Elyon, which we should have said earlier this evening. That thousands will fall away from you. That's pegoyim. That means no one will be able to attack you. V'omer Yoshe b'Seiser Elyon b'tzel shaka yisloinad ad ki ata Hashem machsei Elyon samta meinecha. Hashem Rabu Tzorai Adla Hashem Hayeshua Al Amcha Bechasechasel. You say the entire section from Mizmah Davarachai until Hashem Hayeshua Al Amcha Bechasechasel. These are the shirim that they said while expanding Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Omer Lahu Lahani Kroi Begani. Yeshua ben Levi would say these psukim that we just said. These psukim that have a very powerful psukim for chasing away enemies, and he would sleep. He would use it as a what do you call it? Something to help him sleep.
Lullaby.
No. There's a medical term for it.
Oh.
What are things to make you sleep at night?
Someone Ambien?
Yeah, what are those called? What is that class of things called?
Like a benzodiazepine?
No, I'd say just in general. What do we call them? We call them sedatives. I don't know. I know because I got them when I was sick, and someone one time asked me if I had a laxative in the house, and I gave it to him, and it turns out it was this thing that puts you to sleep.
Yeah, Xanax, wonderful. Yeah,
didn't
that sounds about right.
That's why you shouldn't go to your neighbor to ask for things. Anyway, so Yeshua ben Levi would use these psukim to help him sleep. In fact, Yeshua ben Levi, I guess the real word would be soporific. That's the right word. Yeshua ben Levi also lehisrapes b'divrei Torah. You can't use psukim to deal with your medical problems. It's also, even if we're not saying it doesn't work, but you're not, one is prohibited from doing so. Saktamar lahagan shani. It's one thing if you have an illness, if you have a problem, and you're using the psukim to get rid of the problem. But if you're doing it as a preventative, prophylactically, it's okay. Also the ikamaka. So we're saying that which it's also to use a pasuk. It's talking about where he already has an affliction. Also when someone has a maka, when he has an affliction, and he uses a pasuk to get rid of it, it's only also, it's really worse than that. Someone who whispers psukim or incantations to get rid of an affliction. It's not just asur, but it's a very serious thing that he's doing wrong. It's a terrible thing to do. So the Gemara explains that which we say that you lose your chelik and oil. Someone would lose the chelik of an elam haba for using a pasuk to get rid of a wound. That's talking about someone who spits on the wound, and as the saliva is before him, he uses the shame, he uses a pasuk and the shame Hashem to get rid of the makkah. So that's using the shame in front of the saliva is the problem. That's what makes him lose his chelik olam haba. So Bezin would go. We're going back to the Brisa, to the Mishnah, where we explained. In the Mishnah, we said what the procedure was for expanding the boundaries. The Bezin would go ushtei toides achareim, and then there were two toides, which we said were the two loaves lachmei toida that would follow. So tomorrow, remember the Bezdin kami toida asli. That from the way the Mishnah says it, it's saying that first Bezdin comes, and then following it was the lachmei toida. But this is Nehemiah, where we originally got this thing that he did this procedure. That's what we saw what the procedure was. And it says that first had the shtei toides, and then the Bezdin was after them. So Ketzad Mahalchus, first the word says, how were they going? Did I skip?
You skip.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hachi Kamar. Bezdin Mahalchan, Shtei Toides Mahalchan, Bezdin Achareim. The Gemara answers, no, that Bezdin would go. When it says Bezdin Mahalchan Achareim, what it really means is Bezdin would go, and the Shtei Toides would go in front of them, and Bezdin Achareim. So you have to really twist around the words to say that the Bezdin was going after the Toides. The Gemara, Ketzad Mahalchas, what was the system? How did the Toides travel? One says they were parallel to each other. The two Toides were held at the same, both in front of the Bezdin, but they were next to each other. And one says no, one Toide was in front and one Toide was behind, meaning they were in succession. One Toide, then the second Toide, and then Bezdin. Then we said in the Mishnah that there was one that was burnt and one that was eaten. I think that's what we said. So the one that was pnimis, what's pnimis and what's chitzon? The one that was pnimis is the one that was closer to the wall. And according to the one that says they were one after the other, the inner one is considered the one that was following the first one, but next to Bezdin, it was the middle one. Tanan, hapnimis nechelas v'achitzayin nisrefes. We said the pnimis was eaten, and the one on the outside was burnt. So bishlam alamanda. According to the one that says you had one taida going after the other, and pnimis nechelas, then I could understand why the second one was eaten. The first one would come, and it would be Makadish, the area that it passed, and then when the second one came in, it had never gone out of the area of Yerushalayim, so it's still Kaddish. So why is there a nafkamina that one is burnt and one is eaten? The Mishnah, we're going to see a machlokes later on. It says we're going to see whether you have to do all of these things, or you have to do one of these things that were mentioned in this procedure in order for it to be effective. We said that one mandama says you have to do all these things. And even according to the mandama, it says any one of these parts of the procedure is enough to mekadesh, to extend the boundary of Shalayim. You have to do the entire part of the procedure. That means for example, let's say the Kohen Gadol or the Nasi was going, the whole Nasi had to go in. It couldn't be just half of the Nasi. It's the same thing. If you had two Titus, you had to do both Titus. It wasn't enough to just have, even if you say you don't have to have all of the different parts of the extension procedure, it has to, each individual part has to be complete. So you have to do both Titus. So how could you say, well, once one Titus came in, it was Makadish that part of Yerushalayim? Hello, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Alpi Navi Necheles, Alpi Navi Nisrefes. So we don't, it's not better whichever way you understand it, whether they were on the two Titus were next to each other or in front of each other. In either case, you have a problem. And it comes down to this is what the Navi said, that one of them was eaten and one of them was burnt without any svara behind it. So we said in the Mishnah, anything that wasn't done with all of these constituent parts of the procession is not a valid extension of the Yerushalayim or the Beis Hamikdash, and someone who comes in Betumah and eats there is not going to be chayiv a carbon. Itma Rav Huna Amar b'chol elu tnan. Rav Nachman Amar b'achas mikol elu tnan. Now Rav Huna says, this is the machlekes we just referred to earlier, that you have to do all these things. You need the Kohen Gadol. I think we said the Kohen Gadol. We need the Melech. You need the Urim V'Tumim, and you need the Titus. Rav Nachman Amar b'achas mikol elu. Rav Nachman says you only need one of them. Rav Huna Amar b'chol elu tnan kasav kedusha rishona kitchel l'saita v'kitchel l'asud lava. This is a concept that comes up often, and this is a question when Yeshua conquered Eretz Yisrael. He was Makadesh, the Beis Hamikdash. He was Makadesh Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara is going to use these two things interchangeably, even though normally when we talk about it throughout Shas, we're usually talking about the parts of Eretz Yisrael that were Makadesh L'gabi Meiser. Over here, we're talking more specifically about the Makam Hamikdash that became Makadesh as the Beis Hamikdash. But in all cases, the idea is once something was Makadesh, does it lose its Kedusha later on with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash when Yidden were sent into Galus? So, Reb Huna, who said that you need all of these different parts, he holds that Kedusha Rishon Kitchel L'Shayit v'Kitchel L'Asud Lavai. He says that which was Mekadosh at the beginning remains Kaddish. The Ezra Zeichab Almahu David. Ezra, when he was Mekadosh Yerushalayim in the Beis Hamikdash again, he was doing a symbolic Kedushin, because Ezra did not have the Urim V'Tumim, and I don't think he had a Melech either. So it did not satisfy the requirement, according to Rav Huna, that you have to have all these things. But since Rav Huna holds that Kedusha Rishayna, Kedusha L'Asud Lavai, so therefore it doesn't make a difference. This whole Kedushin, this whole being Mekadesh, this whole reconsecrating Yerushalayim, reconsecrating the Beis Hamikdash, was only symbolic. It was anyway Kaddish on its own. And this is the big machlokes, when people are saying they want to go up to the Beis Hamikdash now and bring a Korban Pesach, they're going based on this shita that Kedusha Rishona remains Kitchel L'Asud Lavai, and it's still Kaddish. The Beis Hamikdash, the Makam Hamikdash is still Kaddish. You have to deal with the problems of Tumah and things like that.
But if you're expanding it, then here by Nehemiah by Ezra he just
yeah, he was just right. No, so I'm saying that's why Rav Huna holds tak. If you want to expand it, you need to have all the elements in order to expand it. Say by the second Beis Hamikdash, according to Rav Huna, you wouldn't be able to expand it. Rav Nachman Amar ba'achas mikol elu tanan kasav kedusha rishona kitchel l'saitza v'loy kitchel l'asud lavai ve'ezra kedusha kaddish. He holds that Ezra was actually being reconsecrating something that had lost its kedusha. But he says you don't need every element. You don't need the Urim V'Tumim, but that's why it was effective. Even though there was no Urim V'Tumim, it still worked. Esei Rav Rav Nachman. Rav asked Rav Nachman. Again, Rav Nachman is the Mandamar who says that Kitchel is Shaita, but he holds that you only need a partial Kedushin. You don't need the Urim V'Tumim. In fact, there, Koshel and Nas B'chol Elu, it says in our Mishnah, Kol shalei nasa b'chol elu. It says very clearly you have to do all these things. So like there, Tani ba'achas mikol elu. So you have to change our Mishnah to understand it to say that someone who didn't do at least one of these things, not that he didn't do all of these things. Toshma. Abishol Omer. Shnei bitzoyin hayu bahar hamishcha. Tachtoyne v'elyoyne. There were two areas, two swamps, they teach it, that were on the Har HaMishcha. Har HaMishcha is Mishcha is oil. It's a reference to Har HaZeisim. So there were two areas on the Har HaZeisim. Tachtoyne v'elyoyne. Tachtoyne niskacha b'chol eilu. The part that was lower down, which so lower down is closer to Yerushalayim, that was niskadish in the first Beis Hamikdash, and it had the V'tumim when it became niskadish. The upper one, further away from Yerushalayim, did not get mekudesh with the V'tumim. It was done by the Eile Goyla, by Ezra. Later on, when there was no king and there was no V'tumim. So what happened? So what was the status of these two areas? The bottom one, that really its kedushin was fully valid, right? It was closer to Yerushalayim, so it was mekudesh by the first Beis Hamikdash. They would eat kachim kalim because it was part of Yerushalayim, and you were allowed to eat kachim kalim there. As we know, Amei the reason why we have demai is because Amaratzim are choshed on Trumas, but they're not choshed on Truma. And the Ma'aser Sheni they were very scared of because it says Asa. Rashi says the pasuk says Asa to Asa. If anyone got 4,000 emails about to say this Reb is his yahrzeit, to say this pasuk on his yahrzeit, you know that Amaratzim are often very sensitive to anything that will affect their bottom line. So they were told that they would learn in Cheder that if you give Ma'aser Sheni, if you eat Ma'aser Sheni properly, you're going to get rich. So they were very careful about it. Even though they were told that, even though they had heard that this area was part of Yerushalayim, they weren't taking any risks with their money. But the Talmidei Chachamim knew that it was fully part of Yerushalayim. They ate the Ma'aser Sheni there as well. The top part that was not mekudesh with the full v'tumim and melech. Amaratzim were not so careful about kachim kalim. They didn't care. They said that we heard that this might be part of Yerushalayim and we're not going to be makbid on it. They were still makbid on Ma'aser Sheni. Chaverim properly knew that this was not part legal. It was not right. It was not kudsha with the proper procedure, and therefore they didn't need even kachim kalim or Ma'aser Sheni. Not neimali kedishua. The Gemara asks, and why weren't they mekadesh it? She'emay sifin aliyah v'alazaras elch b'melech v'navi v'urim v'tum b'sanhedrin shel ayin aleph b'shtei toidus u'b'shir. The reason why he wasn't able to mekadesh the top one, the Elyoino, was because you needed to do all these things. So you see clearly, this is not like like Rav Nachman, who says that you only need one of them. So Gemara v'lama kitshua. Why were they mekadesh it? Like the Gemara lama kitshua, amrit loy kitshua. What are you saying? El lama hichnisua. Gemara is asking if they couldn't be mekadesh it. Why did Ezra go to the trouble of putting it into the chaimis of Yerushalayim? It was the exposed part of Yerushalayim. It was important for the security of Yerushalayim to put it in, to not make it accessible for the enemies. So, and in any case, you see a Mishnah that's clearly saying that you need kol elu in order to be mekadesh. So, Gemara Tanoi, it's machlekes Tanoim. The Tanya, Amar Eliezer, Shematik shayu boinin behechel asu kloyim lahechel kloyim lazars. Rabbi Eliezer says that when they were building the Heichel, they made curtains, construction fences, essentially, for the Heichel, for the area of the Beis Hamikdash, for the building of the Beis Hamikdash, including the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodashim, Ukloim Lazar, and they had another set construction curtain around the courtyard. In the Heichel, they built on the outside of the curtain, but they didn't want the workers to be inside the makom of the Heichel when they were building. So they built they put the curtains on the inner part, and the binyan, the wall, was on the outside of the curtains. But in the Azaris, they were able to build on the inside of the walls because they weren't so makbid. It wasn't so bad if workers went on the inside. Amr of Yeshua, but Yeshua says, Shamati Shemakrivin Aval Pisha Aim Base Bias. Oichlin Kachem Aval Pisha Aim Kloim. I'm sorry. Shamati Shemakrivin Aval Pisha Aim Bias. Oichlin Kachem Aval Pisha Aim Kloim. Kachem Kalam Meiser Sheni Aval Pisha Aim Choim. Neshagudush Rishana Kitchel Shaita Kitchel Asid Lavai. If Yeshua says, Yeshua understood that the reason for these construction fences was to allow, during the period of the building, before they built the wall, to make something, a chayma, that could then be makudish and allow people to eat. So Yeshua says that wasn't necessary. Even though there's no bias, you could still eat the kachem kachem. Even though there's no curtain, you could eat the kachem kalam within the Beis Hamikdash and Ma'aser Sheni, even though there's no wall around Yerushalayim, because the kedusha that was made originally remains.
So what happened to Tuma?
With the Tumah,
The assumption is that everybody's tummy, no?
I don't know why is that the assumption? What does that? What does Tumah have to do with this?
Weren't they eating it in the Mokum Mikdash?
Yeah, but why couldn't they be tar the same way they were tar when the Beis Hamikdash was around? They were able to do everything that you could do in the Beis Hamikdash. They had a temporary Beis Hamikdash essentially. I don't know. Anyway, in any case, I don't know that the Paraduma. I don't think there's anything that has to be done in the Beis Hamikdash for the Paraduma. I don't remember that there is, but even if there is, they had a ad hoc temporary Beis Hamikdash.
Talking about after the destruction of Beis Sheni?
This is before the building of the Beis Hamikdash.
Before the building, okay.
That means we're talking about here. This Mishnah, Rebbe Eliezer, when he said that when they were building the bayis of the bayis Sheni, he says prior to the actual building of the bayis, they put up these curtains to allow them to use the Makam Hamikdash for karbanis. They were to use it for eating the kachem kalam. They would bring karbanis and they would treat it as a Beis Hamikdash from these curtains. Yeshua said it wasn't necessary, even without those curtains, even without the binyan, you didn't have to be reconsecrated because kitcha l'shaita kitcha l'asid lavai. Like the la machlal the Rebbe Eliezer sava loy kitcha l'asid lavai. I'm sorry, did I skip?
No.
Yeah. So you see that Rabbi Yeshua is saying it's kitcha l'asid lavai, and Rebbe Eliezer says loy kitcha l'asid lavai, and we'll have a Amanda Amar who'll be chaylik of machlekes Tanaim. Now that's not a raya. It could be that they both hold kitchel asid lavai, and it's not that Rebbe Eliezer said you needed the curtains in order to enable them to bring karbanis, in order to be mekadosh it. They each just said that that's the way they built it. It wasn't they put up these construction fences, these curtains, but it wasn't to enable bringing karbanis, because you both agreed you could bring karbanis. So why they build these curtains if it wasn't necessary? Since he holds it's kitcha l'asid lavai, let's the use of alma. It was just used because it wasn't proper to have the workings of the Beis Hamikdash open. So lahani tanai detanya amar bishmal b'Rabbi Yosi lam manucha mes elu. Why did the Chacham count these 8 cities that they were subject to the rules of Ari Batei Chayma? They have different rules about the person selling them and being paid to them. It says that when the Bnei Agoyla came up, they found them and they were makashim. Al Rishainis Batlu, Misha Batlu Aretz. But the other ones, they became batal. Their status became batal when the Yidden had to leave Eretz Yisrael. We're assuming all these things are the same. Legabi, the din of Batei Arei Chayma, that it keeps its status as a base Ir Chayma, that also left when the Yidden left. All the different statuses of the land, of Yerushalayim, of Eretz Yisrael, Legabi Trumas HaMaisros, all that stuff, everything either stays or it leaves. So we see over here that it left. Fact the Mara Ramini Amar Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi. That was Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi. Fact the Mara Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi. Elu Bilvad Hayu. Was there only 8? Valek Farnema Shishim Ir Kol Chevel Agav Mlechas Oigav Abashan Kol Ela Aram Betzuris Chayma Gavaya. There were these many cities that had walls. Elalam Manuchanum Maselu. So why they say these 8? Shekshalu Bnei Agayla Matzu Ela V'Kitchim. That when the Bnei Agayla came back, they were Makadashim. Fact the Mara. Kitchim Hashelu Makadashim. Then Amrin Lekaman Delay Tzricha L'Kedushay. The Brisa continues and it says that they don't need to Mekadosh it, like we're going to say in a second. Elamatzu elu manum. They found these and they count them, meaning that they weren't being Mekadosh them. Even though it said Kitchim, it doesn't mean they're Kitchim. They just reminded themselves of these. V'loy elu avada l'kol shetala biyadcha mesaris me'avisecha shem kavos chami ma'yishua benun chol mitzvah ein lo heges ba mneisha dushri shani kitchel shayta v'kitchel ashel lovay. So it says very clearly, this is the continuation of the Brisa. Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi is saying that was Mekadosh at the beginning remains Mekadosh. And before he said that no, these are the only ones that they were Mekadosh. No. Kashi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi. Iba is saying Traitor Ne'alib Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi. Either you can say some machlokes about what Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi says. Iba is saying Mechad Minai Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Yossi. It wasn't Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi, whereas Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Yossi Amra, the Tanya Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Yossi Aimer Ashaloi Chayma. The pasuk says that who does it apply the din of the Arabati Chayma of who could be redeem his thing within a year? That's Asher Loi Chayma, which we dash in Aval Pisha Ein Le Achshav Ahayalei Kaidem Lechein. It's something that has, it's read with a loy that it has a wall, but it's written without that it has a wall. So we dash it's something that had a wall, but it's no longer there, and we're saying that it's still going to be considered. So you see that he holds Kitchel L'Shaita, Kitchel L'Asad Lavai. So therefore, that's who it was really Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yossi, and not Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi. Yeshakayach, I will see you Bez Hashem tomorrow. Thank you for your patience. As you can see, I really wanted to start catching up a little bit. I'm just every day I'm just happier when I know I have my blot to do.
7:50, right?
7:50 tomorrow, Bez Hashem.
Oh, thank you.
Ach,